All right, man. How about that band, the AU Undercover Band? Doug Dean on lead guitar, Kevin Skarbinski on the snare drums, and I have absolutely zero music talent. Rob Brown, Kevin Skarbinski. Catch Scarbo Knows on this channel. Great show. He does a couple of podcasts a week. When he has power, I don't know if these are, just, I think the electric vehicle movement has died a quick death because could you imagine if your town had no power, nobody could go to work? How scary would that be? But there's a lot to talk about today. Executive producer Brendan Martin. Folks, this guy's unreal. He's driving from Ocala to Panama City to go to the beach with his family. Thank you. Doug, you got your power back. Kevin, you got your power back. Where do we get started? I'll just throw this tiger meat out there for y'all, like throwing some, bloody bonitas over the deck of the boat for the Sharks to come get. But Auburn recruiting the last week, it's not been good. But I have a theory that just winning games will correct all this stuff. So, Kevin, take the first stab at it because it's not what you saw a year ago.
Yeah, my first bit of advice to Auburn fans would be come in off the ledge, close the window behind you. Yeah. It is far too early to panic. It is June. It's the last week of June, but it is still June. And signing day has not been changed. It is still in December. So, look, you would love to have 15 commits right now. You'd love to be in the top 10 right now. You'd love to have, most of your class done right now. But that's just not realistic for where Auburn is. And there are practical reasons, not to be a sunshine pumper, but there are practical reasons for why Auburn is where it is. And Rob, we were talking beforehand, if you look at the last 2 years and the success that Hugh Freeze and his staff have had in recruiting, well, what were they able to sell then that they can't sell now? Well, one thing that jumps to mind, playing time.
Yeah.
Right? That's the first thing. That's the first thing every player wants to know. Am I going to play? Everybody wants to play. Nobody wants to wait. Nobody wants to stand in line. And if you do stand in line or wait, it's a lot easier to do that if the program where you are standing in line is winning football games and competing for championships. Yeah. So the best thing, look, Auburn's going to continue to recruit. I know we're heading into a dead period, but Auburn's going to continue to recruit. But the best thing Auburn can do between now and December is, it sounds so simple, doesn't it? Win football games. Yeah. Win a bunch of them.
Kevin, this Auburn schedule, you look, the 16 SEC teams, 15 of them are in the top 16 for toughest strength of schedule coming into the 25 season. Only Missouri slips down to the lowly number 20 spot. Strength of schedule now versus what it is a month, 2-3 months into the season, it all changes. You know that. Teams you expect to be great aren't. I think when Florida fans looked at the Florida State game last year, they thought, man, they're coming off a 13-0 or 12-0, 13-0. But that was the worst Florida State team since Daryl Mudro was the coach. Remember that household name.
That's a Daryl Mudro from the past. Holy cow.
Coach Mudro. Boy, those pep talks. Guys, we only lost by 40. Things are getting better. But, Kevin, does Auburn have to beat either Georgia or Alabama or both? Just playing them a good game is not good enough for Auburn fans. But then again, we've seen Auburn football storm the field, beating a 7 or 8 win Texas A&M team last year. So everything's on the table.
Well, that's a sign of how starved Auburn fans are for that kind of experience, which they're used to experiencing more often than they have in the last few years, certainly. So I've been thinking about that. And, I did a podcast. I said it's war damn time a couple of weeks ago for Auburn to beat Georgia or Alabama. And I still stand on that. But really, if we're talking about levels of progression, what Auburn has got to do is stop mucking around in the bottom third of the SEC. Stop losing to a mediocre Arkansas team, a mediocre Oklahoma team, a mediocre Cal team. Stop losing to those folks. Reestablish yourself in the upper half of the league. And the first way you do that is you win games against the Oklahomas, the Texas A&Ms. And obviously they've done that at home against the Aggies. They've got to go to College Station this time. So the schedule is not tailor-made for a fast start as last year's was. Doesn't mean they can't get off to a fast start. But I think that's the first thing you've got to see. Auburn used to be not that long ago. You don't have to have the memory of an elephant, not to just use any particular animal in the jungle, but you don't have to have the memory of an elephant to remember when Auburn did compete with the Alabamas, the Georgias, the LSUs, the best teams in the league, the best teams in the country. Well, now they are struggling against, like I said, those lower echelon SEC teams. So that's job one to me is beat Arkansas, beat Oklahoma, beat those teams, and then build momentum, gain confidence, and then go beat Georgia or Alabama or both.
Agree. Doug?
Guys, first of all, apologize for my cell phone connection. If I get a call coming in, you know what that does to you. But
hit airplane mode. Hit airplane mode. That'll stop that from happening.
Yeah, well, if I try to hit it, then it'll knock y'all off again. I'll do that in a second. Anyway, I don't think I've been noticing this in the last several weeks, and especially since the House settlement. And I hate to bring us back into legalities and all, but it's absolutely affecting the recruiting strategy of some schools. In Auburn, in true form, yeah. Kevin and Rob, it feels like Auburn is taking the completely risk-averse path in recruiting. And I refer, of course, to the unknown territory that all these big-time recruiting programs are in. And let's just stick to football for now, in which we don't know how sharp the fangs, the teeth will be in this Deloitte College Sports Commission, which is going to oversee the valuations, among other things. And I think there are some of the big boys, I'll refrain from naming them because I don't really have direct knowledge of who's doing what in recruiting. But I think there's a cadre. Jason Caldwell talked about this on the show, Rob, and others have done so. There's a cadre of big boy programs that have taken what I might call the damn the torpedoes recruiting strategy. They are making financial promises to big time recruits to keep them engaged, to see if they can get them coming back for visits and hang on until December, which will be the signing period. Not hardly anybody waits till after the new year anymore to sign. And in the case of Auburn, it appears that there's this constellation of issues that have put a drag on recruiting, with a couple of lost targets and down to 5 commitments at the moment, which is a low figure compared to the last 2 years. Auburn is saying, we don't know. We need to let the dust settle on that commission and how it will affect. What can we really offer a wide receiver $1 million? Can we really offer a big-time 5-star quarterback, pick a number, $2 million? We don't know, so we don't want to come across as breaking promises. But now, if you want to be fair to Auburn, being risk-averse sometimes has its day, right, Scarborough? It's not
yes.
impossible. It is not impossible that come mid to late November, if not October, Auburn could look smarter than they seem at the moment. By that I mean they could have a war chest that they've kept their powder dry and be sitting on a handful of a large number of programs that are breaking promises on money to kids once the commission does its thing. And if that doesn't get legally challenged and reversed, or an injunction based on the free market, et cetera, then Auburn could be sitting there with a war chest and be the school that is flipping 4 and 5 stars more than we could have seen coming. So I'm not predicting that, but I think that's the chessboard as we speak. And man, mixed in with it all, I'll shut up and give Scarborough a shot at it, is this brand new way of colleges doing roster management. That you don't get 85 players anymore that all make good money. you get about what 40-ish,
Maybe.
and the top 10 or 12-ish, top 10 or 12 probably make the serious cash. And so you're going to have those other schools like Wake Forest and Virginia Tech, and name some more, that will pick off your third stringers. And you can say, well, who cares? You need that depth. We're not going to have that depth anymore. So it's welcome to the NFL developmental league, Kevin.
Yeah, the boom times of unregulated NIL have come to an end. If and you mentioned it, Doug, the College Sports Commission has any teeth, if it has the stomach to enforce these new regulations. And speaking of which, my understanding is that under these new guidelines, high school seniors, for example, that you cannot even offer them a revenue sharing package. Just offer. They can't sign until they actually sign in December. But you can't even offer until August 1st of their senior year. I thought that was part of the package. I'm going to guess that's being, as you alluded to, Doug, that's being perhaps trampled over, ignored right now by some schools in making offers, which would explain some of the early commitments. I don't know that to a fact, but it would certainly suggest that. But that's the way it's supposed to work. You can't even offer these guys. And again, these are revenue sharing agreements that will be paid by the schools. And as you very astutely pointed out, that's going to pool the money in fewer players, if you will, the bigger money in fewer players. And that's going to perhaps, again, if this works the way it's supposed to work, then maybe you will see less concentration of talent in one place or two places or half a dozen places. And you see those guys spread out. We've already seen some of this, and the lack of depth at places that are used to having not only great players on the front line, but their second stringers, their third stringers. Some of their third stringers could compete as starters at other schools. Well, those guys are becoming starters at other schools.
Well, you're taking a huge risk if you don't maintain a presence, and you've got to be going after these big guys, because the $21.5 million house settlement. And Jason Caldwell was on our morning show. Doug, when Jason was on from AU Undercover this morning, he threw out a figure of $15 million. I'm guessing from that $21.5 million house settlement. So say you got a salary cap, and Jason accurately pointed out Auburn 85 scholarships. 71 of these guys are eligible to come back next year. So only 14 are done with their eligibility. Hopefully all this virus BS and all this stuff is behind us, and we have guys, the maximum is 5 years. I can remember a couple of 6-year players in Auburn history. Curtis Scooby Stewart from Robert E. Lee High School in Montgomery was a 6-year running back, but that's just because he was getting his master's, I think. But anyway, you go back, and what y'all are saying, Auburn is taking a big risk, just like they wouldn't claim all the national championships that they have. They put it out for public debate and then decided, well, we'll just stick with this because we don't want to do what you want to do. But I think that Auburn is crazy if they don't get out there, and you got to underpromise and overdeliver. But Doug, you're on to it. But if you're not in the mix now, you better be winning 9 or 10 games and at least splitting with your two biggest rivals, because Georgia's never won in the history of the rivalry 8 straight over Auburn, and they're going for number 9 this year.
Yeah, and let me kind of, sometimes when we're having these convos, you go down one road to try to explain it and flesh it out, and it defies a full depth and breadth of explanation. But I want to be real clear. Arguably, it's hard to know for sure. It varies by one recruit to the next. Auburn's problem in year 3 with Freeze is credibility. It's money. I think the NIL disruption and chaos, and probably, if Auburn, if nothing else, our power brokers don't go too many years without getting in squabbles internally. And, there's some reason to suspect that there has been a little of that. I think it was temporary. I don't think it's a flaming deal at the moment. But I do know you've got 2 separate collectives at Auburn. I don't understand the utility of that when you've got on to victory and ever to conquer. And I think they both have great intentions and are doing good things in terms of, funding. But you go back to it, the big issue is we have 5 consecutive years of losing seasons at Auburn, and Hugh Freeze last year did not sufficiently show a trajectory that pointed northward. And so this year, I think it almost doesn't matter how many commitments. We've seen how commitments are worth nothing for even 7 days in many cases. So I think I kind of like the laser focus that Hugh Freeze does not have a war chest to go waste time recruiting in, August through November. He'll still do that, obviously, and he'll try to get kids on visits. And it's great that you've got the Georgia and Alabama game in Jordan-Hare to get, because kids, even if they aren't after Auburn, they will want to come to those games. So it gives you a chance. But it's all about winning games. And I think here's the formula for me. I don't care if this seems hard ass. I think it's a reality right now. I think you got to come out of September 4-1, Scarborough, Rob, and that I'm giving them a mulligan because that's 3 road games. I do not take the Baylor game for granted. These weird opening games on the road, on a Friday night, and so. But then you got Oklahoma and A&M on the road. I like Auburn to beat Oklahoma because I kind of like the intrigue of Jackson Arnold going back where he was unappreciated. And I think he will have every motivation to put in a hell of a game. But those are going to be 3 tough ones. If you come out of September 4-1, you get an off week before Georgia comes to town. And I do think part B to what I'm saying, to get to 9 wins, I think he needs to win 9 games. I'm not saying he'll get fired if he wins 8, but I think you could get fired if you only win 7. And I think he gets to 9 wins, but he needs to split the arch rival games, Alabama or Georgia. We want some red meat, Hugh Freeze. you gotta take down one of those. And as bad as it's been the last 2 years, Scarborough, in his first year, he gets Alabama to a 4th and 31, right. And Ron Roberts had was a living brain donor, as Rob says, on that defensive alignment. So I think it's not as I think it's a more, the opportunities are much greater than the last 4 years potentially would have you believe it. And the guys at next round said, and these are just facts, so I'm not mad at anybody. Auburn is 3-12 against top 25 opponents the last 5 years, and those 3 are not teams that strike fear in your heart. Kevin.
No. Well, think of it this way. Yes, give them credit for getting Alabama to 4th and 31. Give them credit for being tied with Georgia 2 years ago with 6 minutes left when Georgia went on that winning touchdown drive, thereabouts. Give them credit for that. But too often, and you pointed out one of the glaring coaching errors in that defensive set on 4th and 31. Rush 2, drop 8, have one guy just basically is hanging around at the line of scrimmage.
Playing patty cake.
I don't know if he was spying or playing patty cake or what he was doing. But coaching has been an issue. To me, this seems intuitive, right? The closer the game, the more impact a coach can have with a single call, a single substitution. We all remember Gus Malzahn outsmarting Nick Saban in 2019, but he was going to put the punt team in. He didn't want to punt, obviously, to Jalen Waddle from Alabama, and he ended up getting a penalty, too many men on the field, and iced the game and didn't have to punt at the end. So the closer the game, the more important individual coaching decisions become. And I think the jury is definitely still out on Hugh Freeze's ability to make those decisions. When you get in the red zone, when you get in goal line sets, and instead of leaning on just a power runner like Jarquez Hunter, you're calling run pass options for Peyton Thorne. Why are you even giving him that decision? Because he didn't demonstrate the ability to make the correct decision more often than not in those kind of situations. And that's directly on the coaching staff. So you would figure it would be a surprise otherwise if the Baylor game, the Oklahoma game, the Texas A&M game, all of those early games, if those are not one-score games. It would be a surprise if Auburn won by 2 or more touchdowns, or if they lost by 2 or more touchdowns. If they lose any of those games by 2 or more touchdowns, we're having a completely different conversation in September. So you expect they're going to be close games, right? So the pressure is going to be on Freeze and his offensive and defensive coaching staffs to make the right decision in the moment that can make a difference in winning or losing a football game.
Kevin, you know the beauty of that, Kevin, and you know I'm at the point where if I'm to be objective and not drinking the Tumors lemonade too much, I like that Tumors lemonade. It's good stuff. Sneak a little Jack Daniels in it with what we're going through, but what I love about it, you're so on point about how those 3 games. And hey, I'm not ready to write off South Alabama for that matter. They'll have a lot of motivation to come in there and cause problems.
Yes.
Especially if Auburn lost to Baylor, and all of a sudden, you got the fans on your back. But I like September because we don't have to wait long to get a pretty doggone good look about what is Hugh Freeze made of now that he's got a full enough and equipped enough roster to win the games. Most of the games all the games are supposed to, and at least hold our own against games that, as you said, because they're on the road and they'll be close games, barring the surprise, that they're going to be the best coaches in all likelihood will win, or that the team that has one of those elite playmakers that can break a game wide open. And Auburn's got a few of those, and I'm sure Oklahoma and A&M will too.
All right, I'm going to throw this one at you. I think the last time, I'm just thinking, and Doug, come back. But Doug and Kevin, the last time that Auburn played a Friday night game, I was a kid. It was like October 4th or 5th, 1974. October 4th or 5th, 1974, guys. Auburn played on a Friday night in the Orange Bowl against Miami. And I think Ted Hendricks was on that Miami team, the Stork. And
wow, you're going back a ways there.
Auburn kicked a field goal late by Gary Gillis, I think, 24-yarder. Recovered a fumble from Miami at the 47-yard line. And that was a 10-2, pretty damn good Auburn team. But, you used to win a lot of games like that. So I'm going to throw one at both of y'all. Hugh Freeze had 2 good seasons at Ole Miss. 2 good ones, 10-win seasons. And they were doing everything in the world in recruiting. They signed 4 of the top 12 players, like Laquan Treadwell from Chicago, Robert Kimdichie from from Grayson in Loganville, Georgia. His brother Denzel was already there. And then they got the big lineman out of Live Oak, Florida, famous for wearing a gas mask photo the night of the draft. That was actually, I know where that was taken. It was taken at a fraternity house, and some guys jokingly put that out there. It wasn't really funny, but he still was the 13th pick in the draft. Laramie Tunsil, I think that was his name. He was not even on the radar for Ole Miss. Just goes to Ole Miss. But is Hugh Freeze an 8-4 coach? Probably, but he's at Auburn with unlimited resources. The 13th winningest program in the history of college football. Get out of your own way, Hugh. I thought Ken Austin, I've always thought he was a really good coach. Is Hugh, like Gus, afraid of someone else in the room getting credit for anything? Because y'all are right. When you got Jarquez Hunter, and don't sleep on Damari Austin and Jeremiah Cobb, and give credit to Doug, because you pointed out Darrell Robinson from UConn. He's been hurt the last couple of years. You know what? Baylor is going to be picked one. Yeah, Baylor's going to be picked 1, 2, or 3 in the Big 12. That is a game. But good thing is, I don't think Auburn will be sleepwalking through any of those games.
No, they won't. And look, and again, I apologize that cell phones are not very reliable on a podcast. This should be the last time I deal with this.
Don't worry about it.
But I think, to me, you better make hay this year, because the schedule looks, on paper, looks manageable. Now, this time a year ago, we were all talking about how we were putting a W on the right side of the column when whoever was playing Vanderbilt, and all they did was sweep the state of Alabama. So, you have to understand that in the see now for a bunch of reasons, including the number of times you have to go play quality opponents, the dilution of talent that's resulted from the transfer portal, and other factors like the difficulty of playing on the road, the difficulty of building a great locker room because you don't keep these kids long enough. Their margin of error is narrow, but on paper, Auburn gets out of September 4-1, and in potentially even 3-2. None of us want that because then you start to have no room for letdowns. But the schedule sets up to be manageable. You get both the arch rivals at home, and this is, Kevin might agree, this is not Kirby Smart's so far. That can change. This is not his most terrifying roster that he's put on the field. They may end up looking that way by early season or mid-season. And I think Kalen DeBoer, to his credit, is still doing some things to get his team dialed in exactly like he wants. And by the way, I want to give DeBoer credit. He is experimenting with, and aren't we all, these coaches, experimenting with, all right, let's call it 12 to 15 big-time 4- and 5-star players. That's the core elite group, just like the NFL does. But then after that, we got to go find some 3-stars that are affordable. We've got a salary cap. Somebody's going to get told what you can spend. Now, will some booster go rogue? They've had decades of practice doing it at all these programs. I'm not singling out Alabama, Georgia, or anybody in particular. Yeah, I guess some of these guys will supplementally pay kids or give them some kind of tangible benefits. And that, I don't think there's going to be much enforcement coming from the NCAA or anybody else. So it's still the Wild West. It's unsustainable. And we can all sit here and say, well, it's going to still be enjoyable football. And I think it will. But now, look, we can't talk about X's and O's and strategy and players that much, can we? Look what we've dedicated ourselves to on this show.
I mean, Doug, that's right. And Kevin, you think what Doug said, 4-1 or 3-2, then you have zero margin for error, and you're walking around with your hair on fire the rest of the season. Auburn, I mean, Paul Feinbaum said, we talked about it on our morning show on this channel this morning, the SEC era of dominance is in question. And I think the SEC has 1 through 16, the best league in the country, but I don't see an elite team. One of our guests this morning thought, Brendan, our producer, thought it was Texas. I don't think Texas is elite. They got to replace 4 starters on the offensive line. Arch Manning, y'all read the comments from Steve Spurrier. I don't see an elite team. I also see, like Doug says, make hay, man. There's a lot of movement in the aisles, and the 2 and 3s on your depth chart are now starting for Signiago at Indiana. They're starting for Rhett Lashley at SMU. They're not hanging around. And if the culture that you have, and if you look at Auburn and Alabama and Georgia, they ain't losing that many guys that they want to keep. That plays in your favor. And you've got those 2 teams, ironically, both at Jordan-Hare.
Well, one thing that really jumps out at me, and Rob, you sparked this when you mentioned Hugh Freeze's record at Ole Miss. I think Hugh Freeze still has to prove that he has adapted to football the way it's played today.
Right.
And here's an aspect of that, and we're going to see it early because of the schedule. You have got to be able to blend a quarterback who is new to your system, a 1-year guy. Maybe he may stay more than 1 year, but he played somewhere else. You get him out of the portal. You don't have time to develop that guy. You got to develop him quickly. He's got to mesh with the receivers, with the play caller, with the offensive line, with the entire team. They've got to feel him as the leader of certainly the offense and really the team in many ways. So you got to do it in a hurry. And Auburn, by playing Baylor in that first game, has taken away the glorified scrimmage that you might otherwise play in that first game. They've taken away a home game that you normally would get. because they're playing that on the road. So now only 3 of your non-conference games are home games. So they have put more pressure on themselves by the way that this schedule has worked out by adding Baylor, and I applaud them for that. I think we need to see more of these games. And I hope these games will not go away. And I hope the entire debate, should the SEC play 8 or 9 conference games? Are they going to have a 16-team playoff? How's it going to be structured? I hope whatever they decide. And by the way, to the people in charge, you don't have to expand the playoff. You could stay at 12 for a few years to see how it works. You can tweak that, as they appear to be ready to do, and go straight seeding, unlike what that confusing mess they had last year. Go 12, go straight seeding, and let's see how that works for a few years. You can't figure out 16. You can't agree on 16. So why go to 16? Anyway, rant over on that. But I want to see, can Hugh Freeze and Ken Austin, can they develop Jackson Arnold? Can they get the best of Jackson Arnold? Because Jackson Arnold has been highly regarded. He was a big-time recruit coming out of high school. He's done some special things, but he also struggled mightily at Oklahoma. Now, how much of that was Jackson Arnold? How much of that was the situation at Oklahoma? We'll find out more about that starting the last Friday in August.
It's going to be fun, and it's I've commented, which is Captain Obvious material, if you will, but you scan the 16 teams, guys, and look at the QB position. Unless you want to really go out on a limb and based on limited action against fairly weak competition, you want to coronate Arch Manning, an early Heisman candidate, and he won't have to do a lot to get on that list, will he, with that last name? But it just, Nussmeier at LSU, Lagway, Florida, pardon me, it's hard. You just don't find a proven, experienced quarterback in the SEC. So we were talking about margins of error, and predicting the top 5 or so finish in the SEC this year gets even harder because we haven't seen these QBs in some good games quite yet.
We had Ralph Russo on Monday morning's show, formerly for 20 years, AP's national college football writer. Spent 6 years in Jackson, Mississippi, covering as the Mississippi writer. Now he's with The Athletic, one of their senior writers, along with Bruce Feldman. Outstanding. You ever want to go to New York, want to know where all the great restaurants are, Ralph Russo is our man. He was on and talked about the CFP updating the strength of schedule metrics that they're used in the selection process. And The Athletic, they put out a lot of really good content. I'm for straight seeding. That's just me, or the model, the 5-11, 5 conference champions and 11, if you go to 16. But Kevin, you're right. They can't even decide on that. All right. So back here with Auburn, I want to ask both of y'all. The strength of the 10 position groups for Auburn, offensive line has like 82 combined starts. The rest of the team, the other 9 position groups, have 88. Going into, and we'll preview South Alabama. I'm with you, Doug. They could make that game interesting like Troy does, but I expect Auburn to win. And if Auburn's not beating South Alabama, there's going to be a lot of things happening, changes of address, and people are going to be moving. But I'm going to ask both of y'all, start with Kevin. This Baylor game, Dave Aranda, he's in trouble. I mean, he's been struggling out there. Jackson Arnold, I would say this, all 5 starting offensive linemen gone last year. Top 6 receivers were hurt off and on all season. They gave up 46 sacks. And in the Tennessee game, September 21st, Jackson Arnold is replaced by Michael Hawkins. I think he's in a new place. And if he gets hardwired, rewired, I think he has a really bright future. I think he was the number 4 quarterback, number 10 player in America out of high school. Can you imagine Auburn ever signing a quarterback with those kind of credentials out of high school?
Well, he's got to live up to that.
I know.
And they've got to put him in position to live up to that. And part of that, and we have no idea how this balance is going to play out, how much do they incorporate him into the run game? Because we know he can run.
Yes.
Ask Alabama about his ability to run. He didn't light up the sky in that game with his arm.
That's right.
But he was effective running the football. So that's going to be really interesting. And we've talked about this before. Hugh Freeze has a tendency, he loves the spread offense, he loves to throw the ball, he loves the RPOs. But at some point, you gotta play some old school, close to the dirt Auburn football and knock somebody off the ball on their tail and get a 3rd and 1 or a 3rd and 2 or a 3rd and goal or a 2nd and goal from the 3, whatever it might be. And I just think it's not in Hugh Freeze's DNA. Can he adapt? Can he add that to his repertoire? Can he make better decisions? Again, a lot of this comes down to when you play as many close games as they've played, you've put your team in position to win games, but you haven't made the decisions necessarily, or you've asked your players, your quarterback in particular, to make decisions that they haven't proven that they're very good at making in game-changing or game-winning situations. So how does Hugh Freeze, Kent Austin, how do they blend with Jackson Arnold? That's what I wish this Friday were the Baylor-Auburn game.
I do too.
That's how excited I am to see get some answers to these questions that we're going to be asking all summer.
Yeah, great take as always, Kevin. A couple of things and none of this is original on my part, but there are many storylines in that Auburn-Baylor game, which I think is going to really not have to share the limelight at all since it's a Friday night, fair to say. But the intrigue, one of them, is Auburn hired Hugh Freeze in no small part because who was available that had any kind of proven record and had coached at a high level in the SEC. There's no Nick Sabans growing on trees, even if you're willing to pay $10 million a year. And they hired Hugh Freeze because he was an offensive guru by trade, and he continued to look that way a lot, even at Liberty, if you count Liberty experience. I do. But here is Auburn with the biggest doubts and concerns being Auburn's offense. What is going on with performing? Then you look on the Baylor sideline, you got Dave Aranda as a guru, a defensive guru, and had his moments for sure. And his defense at Baylor is is the Achilles heel right now. So which of these two coaches can rise above that in that Friday night game?
Here's what you got to ask yourself about, Kevin, you hit on it real quick. Hugh Freeze leaves the game in 2017, right before media days, because of some off the field shenanigans. But anyway, he comes back in the game. Apparently he spent a lot of time with Kirby Smart and Nick Saban to rehabilitate himself. But, he's still, was he last year trying to curry favor with that group of freshman receivers at Auburn and meanwhile neglecting the running game? And then finally against Kentucky, you turn Jarquez loose for 278 yards. I mean, that's a question that needs to be answered. The second one is, you remember Brian Van Gorder, when he left Georgia in 2004, he was considered an elite defensive coordinator. He goes to the NFL, comes back in 2012, and along with Scott Loeffler, arguably the two worst coordinators on the field simultaneously in Auburn history. And it was the worst season since Auburn lost to Wofford in 1950 in 62 years. He had not kept up with the game. That's a question you got to ask yourself because, damn it, when you're inside the 5, look at that Texas A&M game last year. They keep showing it on SEC Network every day. I don't know why everybody's watching it. I mean, people were texting me last night, did y'all win? I'm like, yes, Auburn did win in overtime. But here's the question, and that is, when you start looking, Auburn got down inside the 5, and they're trying to throw these little passes. Just give the ball to Jarquez or Jeremiah Cobb. I'm surprised. I'm shocked. It says a lot about the toughness of Jeremiah Cobb and Damari Austin that they're still there, that they've waited around through all this. I hope their
Rob,
reward
let me.
is
Sorry if
real.
I froze on that last thing. I'm
Yeah.
trying to make
No.
It's supremely frustrating doing it using a cell phone. But this is small, but there could be 3 or 4 games that are so tight, as Kevin was saying, for a team like Auburn. It's not going to go out and dominate game in game. I think with these explosive receivers and a solid DJ Durkin defense, there's a chance that there will be a couple of games Auburn surprises winning going away. They're more likely to be in Jordan Hare if that happens. But the last year, we had to roll the dice with a freshman, Towns Magoo, kicking field goals. And you can bet that when Auburn got close to the red zone last year, they were thinking, we got to try to get in the end zone, or we got to try to get a 20 to 30-yard field goal set up. And that really messes with the coach's head, the play caller's head. And this year, I think if it's looking like a tight game and 3 points really matters, they should have more confidence with McPherson back and so far healthy. Hope he stays that way and looking good kicking, that they can say, look, we've got, it's nearly automatic. Nothing's automatic, but closer to it with McPherson inside 50 yards. So we can run the ball on first down if we want. We don't necessarily have to. And with these receivers, it should open things up where they're not looking for you to run when Hugh Freeze does decide to run. So I think just the roster and the depth chart at the skill positions makes it more likely that Hugh Freeze's play calling can return to form like we saw at Ole Miss. But Kevin's right. It's an open – I'm not smart enough to understand the schematics, but has the game of defense caught up with what Hugh Freeze was doing a lot at Ole Miss? I think players still make plays, but, there's only so many Sarkisians and Lane Kiffins to go around to have brilliant play design and play calling.
And that's one reason I was really surprised, and I'd be anxious to hear your guys' take on it, that Mike Norvell at Florida State hired Gus as his offensive coordinator, because Gus has, let's be honest, he has not been an elite play caller for some time.
No.
He was figured out in the SEC. Now, yeah, they put 48 on Alabama in 2019. They also had two pick sixes in that game, one that went the length of the field.
Yeah.
So they got some help beyond the offense to put points on the board. But Gus has never really adjusted his game. He took the world by storm, obviously, first when he was an offensive coordinator at Auburn. And, of course, having Cam Newton, I probably could have called the plays and they would have gone 14-0. And then when he had Nick Marshall, and what he did, and look, what Gus Malzahn did with Nick Marshall is one of the best, and I believe Rhett Lashley was there as well. That's one of the best coaching jobs you'll ever see, because Nick Marshall was a winning SEC quarterback who had been a defensive back. It's pretty astounding what he developed into, what they developed him into, and what he worked to become. And so I was just shocked because to me, the game has passed Gus Malzahn by from an offensive standpoint. He's not what he used to be. And are we going to be saying that? I think at the end of this year, at some point this year, we're either going to be able to say Hugh Freeze has adjusted to modern football, or we're going to be saying some of the same things about him that what I just said about Gus, that it appears the game has passed him by as an offensive guru, and that title no longer does apply.
I think he's got to be very careful not to listen to Gus too much. I'm telling you, he's got to be very careful of that. I know what the Arkansas people say about Gus. Every time I go through Hughes on my way to Heth, Arkansas, I drive by that decrepit old stadium, Gus Malzahn Field, that they dedicated several years ago. But Jeremy Pruitt, when Auburn lost to Tennessee October 13th of 2018, remember what Jeremy Pruitt said about adjustments? He said, we adjusted, they didn't. He goes, they scripted the first 16 plays. I've been there. I've seen him. Jeremy Pruitt, he went to the Joe Stalin School of Charm and Grace, but he's honest. He's a damn good coach. But I just think that y'all are right. This is the year for Hugh Freeze. It's like, has the game passed him by? Because he is so stuck on these pass plays and these schemes. And I mean, bless his heart, Peyton Thorne, Connor O'Gara told us on this show from Saturday Down South on our morning show, Peyton was benched 4 times at Michigan State. It's kind of like, why didn't anyone ask about Stephen Leith before he became Auburn's president, which led to the hiring of Alan Green, which led to the hiring of Brian Harsin? You better vet people before you hire them. But I think this is the biggest season in Freeze's life for obvious reasons. But Doug nailed it. You nailed it. Auburn, knock somebody off the ball. Do what you're
we
good
talked about, this is a quick comment. Kevin can react. Either of you can, as always. At the outset about, what's changed about recruiting, and some of the changes appear to be barely affecting the big name programs that have won championships the last 5 or 10 years, Georgia, Alabama, and a bunch of others. Yeah. I think their strategy is hope or damn the torpedoes. We know that changes are coming, but we're not going to scare our top recruits off saying, no, I know you think you're worth $2 million. We can offer you 500 right now, or we got to wait and see. Meanwhile, there may be a few programs that are risk averse, like the leak in Lee County, and preferring to. I think that's partly we want recruits to think of us as high integrity, and we're not going to make promises and have to backpedal on them. But there's another sidebar to this that some analysts have talked about, and that is there are still some programs, and this is a clear violation, that are paying kids something or another to make a commitment, a verbal commitment. You guys heard that? So that's a sort of a pre-signing bonus or commitment bonus that's expressly, as far as I know, it's not allowed within the rules. So, just when we thought the name, image, and likeness and all this legislation would bring an end to dirty money, dark money in college football, it just changed the way the currency works, or the logistics of it, apparently.
Well, we mentioned earlier, we need to see if this College Sports Commission is going to have any teeth and any stomach to actually enforce the rules as they are now constituted. But the lawsuit that to me is the most important one in the pipeline right now is Wisconsin and Miami, and the tampering question.
Oh, yeah.
And isn't it interesting
Xavier Lewis
that Wisconsin did not sue the player with whom it had a signed agreement for both NIL and revenue sharing? And of course, the revenue sharing couldn't take place yet. It can't take place until July 1st, if you're following the rules. But they didn't sue the player, because you could see the problem with that and how other schools would use that against you. But they sued Miami for tampering. Now, the disposition of that case is going to be very interesting, because we all know that professional sports take tampering very seriously. There are actual repercussions if you are found guilty of tampering. There are serious financial penalties. You lose draft picks. This is going to be, to me, a game changer, and will help slow down the movement of players that we've seen through the transfer portal if Wisconsin prevails in this suit. So that's one that to keep an eye on, as I know fans want to, and we do too, want to keep our eyes more on the field than in the courtroom. But that's one thing that's going on in the courtroom that is very much worth keeping up with, to know, along with the College Sports Commission, are we going to have an actual law enforcement system in place, if you will, in college sports going forward?
Kevin, they're suing. I know you are familiar with the top 10 most wanted fugitive William Sutton's famous quote. That this is why William Sutton foretold this in 1952. This is why Wisconsin sued Miami, not the player. Sutton was asked, "Why do you rob banks?" And he answered, "That's where the money is."
Yeah. Right. Well, hey, how about this one? We had John Talty comes on our show, and I started reading this, the price, chaos in the current environment. I think we talked about it this morning. The winners are billable hours for Deloitte and attorneys. Those are the winners.
Find out, what is Deloitte making on this?
Yeah, I mean, my my nephew worked for him. My other nephew works for KPMG and has to commute to New York every week. But I'm telling you, it's going to be a lot of money, and everything over $650 has to pass the eye test, guys. I mean, TBM, we see a lot of schedules. It'll say TBD, to be determined, or TBA, to be announced. TBM is the big deal in college football. The bag man is back. He never left us, but Brendan talks about it. We all talk about it. But is it ironic that the same schools that are winning now are pretty much the same schools that were winning before? And you wonder why all these recruits locked in 6, 8, 12 months ahead, and there was never any question about where they were going. And sure, it was all above board.
I'm impressed, Rob. You said that with a straight face.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Bigfoot is alive, by the way. Look behind you.
There's what is the app called? NIL Go, and
NIL Go, yes.
I heard one of the very sharp female analysts, ESPN analysts, or one of the big networks, comment. She had talked to a bunch of highly regarded recruits and asked them if they had heard of NIL. None of them had heard of it, and they've all been promised or are already getting NIL money or under the table money, and so they are required to disclose that on this app, but none of them had heard of the app.
Well, and I'll pile on there, Doug. Apparently, schools, at least as of a little while ago, maybe this has changed, they didn't know, they're going to have to pay, as you mentioned, how much is Deloitte getting paid to run this NIL Go operation, and how much is the College Sports Commission being paid? The schools are going to pay for that, but they didn't even know how much they were going to be required to contribute to pay for this as of a very short time ago. So this is a flood of changes happening very, very quickly. And so it's really hard to predict where this is going to go. And that's why, to go back to the original point we were discussing, maybe it is wise, if you're in Auburn or any other school, to be a little reticent, a little cautious about how you approach these things, instead of damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, catch me if you can.
Yeah.
To negotiate with intrepidity. I mean, I think there's a lot of trepidation on the part of Auburn. It's an engineering school. I mean, they're not going to be foolish, but then you look at if you're Auburn and you're an assistant coach and you're a position coach and you've got a recruit that you really want, you still got to go before the head coach at the end of the table and sell the head coach on that. And there are going to be two questions at Auburn that they're always going to ask. Is he good enough to help us beat Georgia? And is he good enough to help us beat Alabama? That's all that matters at Auburn. Well, what are Georgia and Alabama doing? Full speed ahead in recruiting, man. Georgia, in the next 10, 12 days, is going to announce, from what I'm hearing, 5 or 6 kaboom recruits. I mean, put them in number one on steroids. And it's not going to make Auburn people feel real secure. And with Ryan Grubb being at Alabama, Auburn doesn't have time to try to be, Emily Post's book of etiquette when it comes to recruiting. It better be ready to fight, or Auburn's going to fall way behind.
Yeah, and to keep the thread here intact,
yeah.
Unless at the risk of me sounding like William Sutton, the famous bank robber, if ever the Auburns, the cautious, drive the speed limit in recruiting, don't go up 90 miles an hour through a school zone.
Yes.
If ever there were a time to go rogue, and use under the table money, it would be now.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Hey, yeah. Yeah.
I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying it's surprising. The timing of when you choose to be cautious and risk averse, it says a lot about the culture.
It does. and we just got a few minutes. I just think winning will solve all this stuff. You know, I mean, you go win 8, 9, 10 games. You beat Georgia or Alabama. You beat both of them by December. When it comes to recruiting, Auburn's going to be choosing. They're not going to be recruiting.
They are, and I'm so glad you mentioned that. Can't believe we didn't bring up Hugh Freeze's golf handicap in this.
Oh, so
but listen, hey, go out and win 9 games, and I'll make a bold prediction for you right now. In November or maybe early December, Hugh Freeze can do what I think he's got a chance with this roster to do and win 9 games. And a lot depends on which the 9 are, and one of them needs to be Georgia or Alabama. But then people are going to be hailing him for having work-life balance, and that in the summer he knew what he was doing, getting his mojo back, calming down, getting the competitive juices going, playing golf, and it will all be a funny punchline as opposed to a reason to fire Hugh Freeze, for God's sake.
And also, he could be out there with recruits on the golf course, guys.
Well, that's a new twist on that story, Rob. I hadn't heard yet. But let's be honest. I don't recall any Florida fans from 1990 to 2001 complaining about how much golf Steve Spurrier was playing when they were winning all of those SEC games, all of those SEC championships, and one national championship.
Yeah.
No one cared. No one
winning cures all.
Hey, if you're going through a drought like we have sometimes over here in the Mid-South, nothing cures a drought like several days, 5 or 6 inch tropical storm sitting on top of you, man. Great discussion today, guys. Catch Him Scarborough Knows on this channel a couple of times a week. Awesome stuff. Birmingham Lead, all your stuff. Doug Dean, extraordinaire, producing the show Against Wild Circumstances. Our executive producer, Brenda Martin, driving from Ocala to Pensacola. Awesome stuff. But yeah, I think this stuff's going to all work out for Auburn because I think they're going to have a good season. And I think Jackson Arnold is going to come out and surprise some people. But thank y'all for watching. Share the show. And guys, say goodbye, whatever you want to say.
Get me out of here.
All right. Good night. Y'all take care. Thank you. Thanks, Brendan. Guys. Be careful driving over. And we should do it again next week.